I'm Akin, and welcome to the Horror Zone. This is one of many stories that I have from working the night shift at a laundromat in a bad area, and it's definitely the freakiest. For context, my mom took a job years ago at a local laundromat because we knew the owner and we needed extra money. I was around 10 when she got the job, and she allowed me to come with her because she would give me a little allowance for helping. I ended up going with her every night for years, and as I got older, I mainly went to make sure my mom was safe because I worried about her. We regularly dealt with angry customers refusing to leave, most of whom were drunk or high, and we had to call the police a few times. My mom always worried about me tagging along, but I insisted, and to this day, I still can't say I regret it. A lot of good came out of it, mainly the work experience, and that made up for how intense it could be. I have a lot of interesting stories from that time, but this is one that takes cake for the most horrifying, and it took place when I was about 12. Being a young and dumb kid I designated myself the job of chasing people off when it was closing time. We would have people parking behind the building pretty regularly, so I would walk to the side of the building and start yelling that they were not trespassing and I would call the cops if they didn't leave. I feel that this is important to bring up because I now realize that I let any shady person hanging around the building at night know of my presence, and that's a dangerous thing to do when you're a 12-year-old girl. I was blissfully unaware that anything could happen to me until one night when we showed up to find out the door locked had been broken. My mom had unlocked the building that morning, so it wasn't like a break-in attempt since it had been unlocked all day. We were a bit shaken up, but my mom texted her boss to let him know about it and just told me to tell her if I saw anyone pull up. After about 30 minutes, I finished my few tasks and sat down to draw my sketchbook. I had barely sat down for a few minutes when I heard the door swing open, which startled me because normally people just knock when they see the very obvious closed sign. My mom noticed it too and yelled out that we were closed. I heard an old man's voice respond, explaining that he had just come in to use our drink machine. We normally let people in to use our snacks and drink machine, so my mom told him he had a few minutes and went back into the closet to grab something. I was sitting about 7 feet away from the drink machine, so I heard him walk up but didn't pay much attention to him. I continued to draw until I started getting the feeling that someone was watching me, and I realized that I didn't hear this guy put any money in the drink machine. I nervously glanced to my left and saw the tall man in his mid-60s staring at me with a big smile on his face. I jumped a little but forced an awkward smile back at him and directed my attention back to the drawing. As soon as I did this, I heard what sounded like shuffling, and when I looked over again, he came closer. I didn't know what to do, so I tried to not look at him, but every time I would look away, he would shuffle closer. His body was facing the drink machine, but his neck was cranked in my direction, and he wouldn't stop smiling and staring. I began shaking and panicking, and my eyes were darting back and forth between him and the closest door while I tried to plan a fast escape. I went to reach for my knife in my bag because I couldn't imagine this man's intentions, and quickly realized that it was not there. I had left my knife at home when I needed it the most, and I was petrified. I decided to just stare back at him, despite being terrified and trembling violently, and after what felt like an eternity, he suddenly broke eye contact and yelled to my mom to have a good night before turning around and walking out. Relief hit me instantly, and I tried to calm myself down after what had just happened. I thought I was finally safe, and started to get up and splash some water on my face when I saw him sit down on a bench outside. Panic and dread hit me like a brick, and I sprinted to the closest to hide. I filled my mom in on everything, and she told me to run to the car, and she would get behind me and him and pepper spray him if needed. I did as she told me and ran to the car, and as I passed him, he stood up and began walking towards the car. My mom yelled at him to get away from her car, and his reaction was to try to calmly start a conversation about the make and model of her car while staring right at me. She ignored him, hopped in the car, locked us in, and started backing up as quickly as she could. I dug down in my seat, but I could see him standing there, and I know he could see me because I watched as he lifted his hand and waved me goodbye before walking around to the back of the building and disappearing into the darkness. I felt sick. I couldn't sleep that night, and I never dared to set foot anywhere near the back of the building again, so I guess that was a lesson learned. Creepy old smiling man, let's not meet again. It was the summer of 1978, and we had just moved from Canada to Malaysia. As a 7-year-old child, I was excited about moving to a new country and the adventures that awaited me. I had no idea that one of my first adventures would be so sinister. We ended up staying at a Hilton hotel with other expat families while we waited for the company's supplied home to be ready for us to move in. As a second grader, staying in a hotel for 2 weeks was exciting and seemed like a camping trip spent in luxury. Since the other expat families were also staying in the hotel, I had thoughts of other children to play with. One of the games we would play was hide and seek, and this meant using the elevator to hide out on the other floors or in the stairwell. The hotel gave us children a false sense of security. One day, when we were playing hide and seek, I took the elevator alone to the top floor of the building, which I believe was the 30th floor, and exited the elevator. As I rounded the corner of the bank of elevators, I ran into a man and woman. They looked to be in their 30s and appeared native to the country. I recall they did not look frightening and they were dressed nicely. While they looked normal, their actions immediately suggested something different. The man tried to grab my arm and I pulled away. I immediately backed away from the couple until we were standing about 10 feet apart. Of course, I was on the edge of turning and running, but I understood that I had nowhere to run if a pursuit did occur. A short-lived standoff ensued. I assumed the man wanted to convince me to come with them willingly because, if I screamed, it could attract the attention of other guests staying in that floor. So, from 50 feet apart, we stared each other down. I was standing closest to the bank of elevators, and they were standing between me and the stairwell. The man took a chocolate bar out of his pocket and held it out to me. Of course, this would mean approaching the couple to take it, and there was no way in hell I was going to do that. The man and the woman were staring at me with creepy fake smiles, and I could see that their body positioning screamed, "We may lunge at you at any moment." As a side note, I remember the chocolate bar had nuts in it, and I hated nuts in chocolate bars. When it was clear that I wasn't going to come to them, I could see the man's stance start to change into, "I'm about to lunge at you," and my stance changed to, "I think it's time to run." Right when it looked like the man was going to lunge at me, the elevator door dinged and someone got off on the floor. I don't remember who it was or what they looked like because as soon as I heard the sound, I turned and bolted past the person and into the open elevator doors. I recall that the man and woman retreated in the opposite direction when they heard the sound, maybe to the room or to the stairwell. I never told anyone about what had happened until decades later, and as a child, I really pushed it to the back of my mind until I was much older. It is sobering how the smallest things in life can be so life-changing. I don't remember who got off on that floor, but I remain eternally grateful to them. To my potential kidnapper, let's not meet again. Growing up in a small country town, there wasn't much to do for fun. My friends and I often spent our weekends exploring the dense woods that surrounded our community. We knew the trails like the back of our hands, and the forest felt like our playground. But one weekend changed everything, and I've never set foot in the woods again. It was late October, and the air was crisp with dance of fallen leaves. My friends Tom, Jerry, and Mike and I decided to go on one last camping trip before the winter set in. We packed our gear and headed to our favorite spot, a clearing mile into the woods, where we would build a makeshift fire pit over the summer. The first night was perfect. We roasted marshmallows, told ghost stories, and laughed at the story night. As the fire died down, we settled into our tents, ready for a good night's sleep. That's when the first strange occurrence happened. I woke up to a sound of twigs snapping outside my tent. Thinking it was just an animal, I ignored it at first. But then I heard whispering, soft, unintelligible voices. My heart raced as I strained to hear what was being said, but it was too faint to make out. I unzipped my tent just enough to peek outside. In the dim moonlight, I saw a figure standing at the edge of our camp. It was a man, tall and thin, wearing tattered clothes and a wide brim hat that cast a shadow over his face. He stood there, motionless, watching us. My first thought was that he might have been a hiker or someone who got lost, but something about him felt wrong. I quickly zipped up my tent and laid back down, hoping it would go away. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep because when I woke up, it was in the morning and the man was gone. I didn't mention it to my friends, chalking it up to a half-dreamt illusion. The next day, we hiked further into the woods, exploring new trails and enjoying the autumn scenery. We returned to our camp just before dusk, exhausted but happy. As night fell, we gathered together to fire again, but the mood was different. An eerie silence settled over the woods, and the usual night sounds seemed muted. Around midnight, we heard it again, the whispering. This time it was closer. Tom, who had gone to get more firewood, came back pale-faced. "There's something out there," he whispered, glancing nervously into the darkness. We all grabbed our flashlights and shot them into the trees. At first we saw nothing, but then Jenny gasped and pointed. The man from the night before was back, standing just beyond the reach of our lights. He didn't move or speak, he just watched us with an unsettling intensity. "Who are you?" Mike called out, his voice shaking. The man didn't respond. Instead, he took a step forward, then another. Panic set in, and we all backed away, stumbling over our camping gear. And suddenly, the man lunged at us, and we bolted in different directions. I ran blindly through the woods, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear my friends shouting and the man's heavy footsteps behind me. I didn't stop until I reached a small cave we discovered on a previous trip. I hid inside, trying to catch my breath and calm my racing heart. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped. I peeked out and saw the man standing at the entrance of the cave, his face still hidden by the hat. He didn't come in, he just stood there, staring. I felt trapped and paralyzed by fear. After what felt like an eternity, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the woods. I stayed in the cave until dawn, too scared to move. When I finally emerged, I found my friends at the campsite, all of them shaking and pale. They had similar stories. The man had chased them but stopped short of actually catching them. We packed up our things and left as quickly as we could. We reported the incident to local authorities, but they found no trace of the man. No one in town had seen or heard anyone matching the description. To this day, I don't know who or what the man was. But to the woodsman that stalked us that night, let's not meet again.